as a viewer, why does my viewership matter, right? I think we like to put all of the onus on the whoever's producing the content, but what is my role in the content that I'm watching and what I'm seeing?
Your role is actually very critical. First of all, simply the number of people viewing affects the amount of the price that the station or the news source can charge for the advertising, which means that the numbers viewing or reading or whatever the news, what form of news you're consuming, affects the amount of revenue that the news producer is earning. And that in turn affects the amount of resources that news producer has to produce news. So the larger the audience, the higher the quality news that the producer can make. As audiences have shrunk, the number of reporters that a news station or a newspaper has been shrinking. The amount of coverage they can do shrinks, et cetera. So it becomes a spiral, either up or down. You and I have been able to get news and information delivered to us either at very low cost, only a fraction of what it actually costs to produce and distribute, or in the case of broadcast television and broadcast radio, for free, where we haven't had to pay for it at all, because the bills were being paid by advertisers.
When I go flip back in my, old journalism books, and you talk about the start of specifically TV broadcast news, there were very few options for where you got your news and information. And is it accurate to say that now every piece of information is in some way in competition for our eyeballs?
Absolutely. Yes, because when we talk about the cost of consuming news and information, it's not like most products. If you buy something to eat, a hamburger, or if you buy a product like a pair of shoes, you pay for that and you consume it. And the only thing you pay to consume it is what you actually take out of your wallet and pay for it, right? News and information is very different. When you consume media of any type, including entertainment media, one of the costs that you pay to consume it is your time. And so the attention economy is a very, very competitive market, and everybody who's trying to feed you entertainment or information or news is competing for your highly valuable time and attention. And in fact, in many ways, that's as competitive an area as the competition for your money in this day and age.
It's interesting to think about it in the way that as I'm looking at content, to picture myself putting dollars towards whatever content creator is putting out there, because that's essentially what's happening.
Right. And there's another element to it too. You talked about back in the even 25 years ago, you basically had 3 or 4 or 5 different choices for news and information in broadcast and cable. And then you had obviously newspapers and magazines. And one of the things we know is that actually had an impact. The fact that you had so few choices had an impact on the way journalists and news organizations approached news, because they were all competing for a very finite audience, but there were not very many competitors. And so basically the shortest distance between the news and information they were producing and every point of view that could exist in their audience was to stay fairly neutral and be very concerned with not being biased and with, trying to tell the story straight. Now, when we have so much competition for our time and attention, and we have so many different places that we can choose to go to hear only what we want to hear, there are many, many news producers who are willing to win our time and attention by telling us only what we want to hear, regardless of whether or not it's true. One thing we know about human psychology is that we all seek, contrary to what we were raised to believe, in that this free marketplace of ideas, that people will listen to all kinds of different viewpoints and make the decision about what they want to focus on and what they believe based on what they know and what's based for them. Psychology has really upended our understanding of that, and we now understand that all human beings are very inclined to seek out information that confirms what they already believe. And that's a very important concept, because basically bias is in the eye of the beholder. If you tell me something that I don't believe already, or that I don't want to believe, I'm likely to believe that you're lying to me, or that you're being biased in how you're presenting it, regardless of the facts and evidence that are in front of me. That's very important in the 21st century news media environment, because we now have what I call hyper competition. We actually have more sources of news and information available to us than we have audiences to consume them or advertisers to pay for them, because simply there are so many people who are producing and distributing content for free on social media, sharing stories that are produced in the media, and you don't have to pay for them because your friend posted it to Facebook or whatever. And consequently, the revenue models that support high quality journalism are falling apart. Also, as a result of that, we have a lot of people who are exploiting that human psychological weakness and finding out that it in fact pays very well for them to feed people what they want to believe, regardless of whether or not there's an ounce of truth in what they're saying. And then you get what we all know of as these information bubbles, where we're only consuming what we want to believe, as opposed to whether or not, that there's any truth to what we're being told. And we're not exposing ourselves to contrary views, and that feeds into some of the political polarization that we have now. However, it can be a very successful media business model. That said, most major news organizations try to keep with traditional news values, and they try to present two sides, the arguments and counter arguments, but it also is part of their job to call out someone who is out and out lying, particularly if that person is a prominent person who they can't ignore because of that person's position, but that person is simply not telling the truth. Then it is not bias on the part of a journalist to say this is a falsehood. That is simply a statement of correction based upon facts and evidence. But if you actually are a supporter of that person, you're going to say that's biased, right? It's a real dilemma for journalism today.